to start the cast on, Mobius cast on for the Flamenco, and we start by making our usual slip knot. Check the pattern and determine what size you're going to make. I'm going to be casting on for the small size. And the way we begin the cast on, it's our usual way, a knitted cast on. So as if we're going to knit the stitch, but instead of taking it off the needle, we're going to put the next stitch onto the left needle. So in the stitch, as if we're going to knit, we're actually giving it a bit of a twist as we're putting it back on to the left hand needle. Once you get going, you can just keep doing that cast on without actually slipping the right needle out. So as if to knit, twisting it, putting it back on to the left hand needle. We'll keep going and we'll cast on the first number of stitches as given in the pattern, and then we'll resume the video when we're ready to do the Mobius part. Okay, so we've cast on the first lot of stitches. What I forgot to mention, but it is written in the pattern, is that you need to cast on fairly loosely. Otherwise you'll find this second part a bit difficult. So now we're going to change our knitting around as if we're going to start knitting the stitches we've cast on with the working yarn on our right needle. Now instead of working into that first stitch as we normally would, we're going to actually work into the yarn that's laying below the stitches. So into that yarn that's laying below the stitch, and we're going to knit that onto our right hand needle. The first couple might be a little bit tricky, you've got to manoeuvre them with your fingers a bit. So you knit it onto the right hand needle. So the next one, we're knitting into that yarn that's below the stitches on the left hand needle. I haven't picked a very good yarn, it's splitting. Okay, and we knit that onto the right hand needle. And keep continuing, knitting into that yarn between the stitches, under the stitch on the left hand needle, knit it onto the right hand needle. So our original cast on is staying here, and we're doing a second lot of stitches casting on below. So they're going to be cast onto our right hand needle, and we're going to continue all the way around. All our cast on stitches, we're going to be casting on another stitch below in that yarn that goes between the two stitches. This is why it was important that you have a loose cast on to start. You'll find it tightens it up when you do this second round below. So we'll just keep continuing with that all the way around. Have our second row of cast-ons below, and do that all the way to the end. Okay, as you can see, I'm nearly halfway around doing the second part of the cast on, and what I'm finding is it's so much easier to get into that loop yarn that I want to do the second part of the cast on when it's down here on the cable instead of up on the needle. It's not as tight. So what I found is if I turn it get the stitches onto the cable and turn them upside down, I can actually do that cast on, second part of the cast on, quite easily. Then trying to do it below the stitch while it's on the actual tip. So push the stitches down onto the cable, just flip them upside down, and then just like you're picking up stitches, knit into that loop that you can see across the top there, and make a stitch that goes onto your right hand needle. And you can see what's happening where the needle's sort of looping around on itself as we're casting on. The magic of the Mobius. Okay, so when you've knit into that loop below each stitch, you'll end up with something that looks a bit like this. So if you start with your finger on the left hand needle and trace it all the way around, you will actually find that the stitches loop around on themselves and you'll end up back out on the right hand needle. That's a Mobius. So all we do now is we're ready to start working from the pattern. So we just place a stitch marker on the right hand needle and you just follow the pattern, working your way around. Don't worry about whether you're working from the needle or the cable or what's on top or what's below. You're just knitting as you usually do, from working stitches from the left hand needle onto the right hand needle. The Mobius will sort itself out as you knit. If you'd like to change yarns at any time during the pattern, I usually change when I get back to the beginning of a row, which will be when you get round to your stitch marker again. Sometimes while you're knitting, the stitch marker will be up here on the top, other times it will be on the bottom. But each time you come back to that stitch marker, when you come around and you find it's on the left hand tip, just slide it over, you know you've completed another round. And then at the end it all unfolds into a beautiful Mobius.